first video on YouTube, and I'm going to share it across all socials. Today's topic is going to be based off grief. I know that I have a lot of friends and family that has had to navigate just like through grief, and I didn't necessarily feel like I was a person that lost someone, or I've lost a lot of people over the years, but it hasn't necessarily been due to death. I've had a lot of answered prayers within the last couple years, but it hasn't been all sunshine and roses. So I just kind of wanted to share, every week at least I'm going to post like one video, and it's just going to be like a different topic of things that either God has given me, things that I've walked through, things that I'm still trying to deal with possibly. But I hope that in me being vulnerable and opening up, it helps you guys see me for who I am, and then also releases me from like guilt and shame, of some of the things that I've had to navigate through. And I hope that as I be vulnerable, that it heals you guys in a way that it has healed me. So thank you guys for watching if you made it this far. And if you make it to the end of the video, make sure that you like, comment, and subscribe. And maybe just share some of the ways that you've had to grieve, some of the other uncommon things that people probably don't consider as grief, that maybe you had to walk through as well in the comments. So I guess I just want to start with me meeting my biological mother. I'm not going to really go into what the details of what that looked like. I'm going to do that in a separate video possibly, but right now I'm still kind of navigating through that, so I don't want to, share too much. I don't want to be that vulnerable. I'm not there yet. And also, that's her story. We want to let her tell her story if she ever wants to. This is just about me, so I don't want to tell nobody's business. So I remember when I first met my mom, it's about almost a year and a couple weeks it'll be. And I called my aunt one day, and this was just like a thing that I would always do, which is just my biological aunt. And I would just talk to her, want to hear her voice, want to be near her, just in whatever way I can, because she doesn't live in the same area as me. So most of our interactions are like through the phone, texting, something like that. So one of the things that I've learned in going to therapy is just making sure that I'm open and honest with my family, my friends, those that surround me, about the things that I'm going through. You can't complain about someone not being there for you and not showing up for you if you don't share what you may be going through with them. And that's hard for me because I'm not a big sharer when it comes to things like that. I just want to get silent. I want to go, revert to going into my isolation, going into myself and just my shell, and just healing myself, and then coming back when everything's all good. It's still one of my favorite methods. It's safe. It keeps people at bay. That does not mean you well. It doesn't put you at risk for things when you're not talking to that person anymore. So it's just like something that I like to do, but it's not the healthy way. So as I've been going to therapy and I've been trying to heal over the last couple years, I want to say about 5 years, that's one of the things that she taught me, was just to make sure that I include others in my pain and include other people in my grief process. And so one of the things I want to point out is that grief doesn't always relate to death. That was a conversation that I had with my aunt, and it was a very tough conversation where she just told me that I would have to try to grieve my mother, in a sense, kind of like have a funeral for her, for who I thought she would be, my expectations of who I thought my mother would be, what she would give me. And I'm gonna try to do this video without crying, but if I do, I got my tissue. But just grieving my process, the process of who I thought she would be, what I thought she would give me, what my expectations for a mother was, and still are, And I think that one of the things I want to point out is that grief is not a one and done. It's not. You may have a memory of a person, you may have a big milestone that happens in your life, and you feel like, oh, I could use my mother here today, I could use my father, I could use my family, or maybe the friends that I don't no longer talk to because we just don't talk, whether we grew away from each other or we live in separate cities, whatever the case may be. And I think that we as a people feel like grief is just, grief is just simple. It's just a one and done. And it only relates to death. For me, I didn't want to grieve my mom. I didn't want to grieve the situation. I didn't want to have a funeral for her in a sense because she's still here. So how do you grieve a person that is still here? And that was something I didn't want to do. So when I got off the phone with my aunt after having that conversation and her telling me her thoughts and, like what she felt like I needed to do just to kind of get through this, it was sad. I cried. I've been crying ever since I've met my mom. Happy tears, some, but some just grieving what I thought things were gonna be like, what I thought my life was gonna be like. And I always felt like I needed to have a public platform where I shared my story and I told people about the things that I've navigated and the challenges of being adopted and just trying to search for my mother and trying to search for a mother. I was one of the people that tried to find a mother in a lot of different women around me. And I think that was a good thing because they taught me a lot, but also was a lot of hurt, a lot of pain, a lot of expectations that I placed on them because I didn't have my biological mother. And it just wasn't fair. It wasn't fair to them. It wasn't fair to me. And so I knew that when I did this next 10 years of my life, that I wasn't going to do it the same way that I did the last decade, And so I had to get really clear about what I wanted, and what I had to heal, in order to get better things, to get better people, you have to heal. And so I was fortunate to be able to find my mom in this process and to be able to lay eyes on her and just to ask her questions that I've been waiting to ask her for years. But in getting all those answers, in meeting her for the first time and looking at her face and just being able to try to place some of the features that's on her, on me, and some of her conversations and her habits, it was just a lot. It was hard. I'm sure you guys can imagine what that looks like. I'm sure that you guys may have navigated through things yourself where it was just not what you expected. And so, like I said, I'm not going to necessarily go into details, but I kind of want to read you guys something that I wrote after the months after meeting my mom. It was a process. It's still a process. And I think what I want you guys to remember is that grief is not easy. It is not a rule book on how to grieve. It's a million books out there. It's a million things that you can Google. I remember my best friend had got me a book for my birthday. She got me a couple books and it was on grief and grieving. And I was like, well, wait a minute, because I don't know if y'all was like me. I'm thinking you got to grieve somebody that's dead. So what are we saying? Is my mom dead? Like, what are we saying? And so I kind of got offended, and I knew she had good intentions. So when I wasn't offended, I was just like, how am I going to grieve somebody that's not dead? And so I ended up putting the books away and filing them away with my other books that I did not read, because I was like, well, when I find my mom, or if I find out that she's died, she's dead, then I'll start the grief process then. But I want you guys to remember that you don't always have to grieve a person that's dead. Number one, grief can relate to a lot of different things. It can relate to a job loss. It can relate to your 20s. It can relate to friends that you may have lost. For me, one of the other things that I navigated through in my grief process is just my body. Going through cancer and beating cancer it takes a toll on your body, as it is. And I had to grieve who my body was before cancer, what my body was before cancer, some of the things that I may have lost due to chemo and radiation, my expectations of what I thought I would be at 35, in my 30s, who I thought I would be, the friends I thought I would have, the husband I thought I would have, the kids I thought I would have. all of those things. And so I think that I took my aunt's advice and I started the grief process, but it wasn't just my mother. I was grieving so much, you know. I was grieving the things that I thought I would have. You know, I put my whole life on hold to find my mom because I just couldn't get it together. I felt like if I, you know, lived my fullest life, whatever that was, then I was saying, oh, I don't want my mom. Like, I don't need her, you know? And I didn't want to put that out in the universe. Like, that was something that I felt like I needed. And so I was like, I'm going to reserve being happy until I find my mom. I'm going to reserve living life, living my dreams, my expectations. And I did try a few different times to try and live my best, fullest life. It never worked. I just couldn't. You know, being adopted is very taxing on you. It's very taxing on who you are as a person because you don't know who you are. You know, I know it's a lot of people out here in the world that says, oh, I was fine. I didn't know my mom. I didn't know my family. I was fine. Like, I didn't need that. I knew exactly who I was. I became a doctor. I did all of these great things. But then it's others out there that's like me that just can't get it together. You know, you could barely get out of bed some days because you just felt like an overwhelming sense of just pain and sadness of it just kind of feels like you were missing something, you know, and I couldn't live. And some days I still find it hard to live in any capacity. But what I realize is I don't want to look back over the next 10 years of my life and feel like, oh, I put everything on hold for something or for someone, and then that not be anything like I expected. Because I think that's one of the things that you got to realize. It's not going to be what you thought it was going to be, you know? And so, starting the process to grieve my mother was crazy. It's still crazy. It's hard. I had to do a lot of crying. And I remember it was a time where I couldn't cry. It was a time where I couldn't be sad, you know? And so I had to get to a place where I had to be honest about what I felt. Honest about what I needed. You know, some days my grief process was complete anger and rage. It was complete anger at God, at my mom, at myself, at my adopted mom, at my family that was around me, because I just felt like things should have been different, you know. So I spent a lot of time crying. So I think that you have to take time to allow yourself to feel your emotions, whatever that looks like. If it's anger, if it's sadness, if it's fear, if it's regret, whatever it is, allow yourself to feel those emotions. The next thing I want to say is to make sure that you take time to grieve, because life don't stop. When I got diagnosed with cancer, life didn't stop. The world didn't stop. Nobody stopped to take care of me, to coddle me, to make sure that I was okay. They had to work. They had things to do. I had to work during treatment. You know, I had to go to treatment. So keep in mind, life does not stop. You're never going to have an opportunity to grieve. You're never going to have a moment where you can go. Most of us are not rich. Most of us, you know, we're just trying to make it out here. So you're not going to have a time where you can take a trip and grieve, you know. You're not going to have people that's going to necessarily understand the process because they've never been through it, you know. And like I said in the beginning, people don't relate grief to your mom, a mom that's alive, to a job loss, to you know, regret of things that you think you could have accomplished, things that you wish you would have done. People don't relate grief to those things. So you have to remember that you can grieve so many different things. And it doesn't have to mean that your mom is dead, your mom is gone, that you don't love your mom, that you're not grateful for the fact that you've met her. It doesn't have to relate to those things. You know, that doesn't mean that one thing doesn't mean the other. But you have to take time to grieve. Nobody's gonna set the stage for you to be able to do that. You have to do that. And you have to do it in the midst of showing up every day as your best self, going to work, taking care of your kids if you have them, taking care of yourself. Whatever responsibilities that you have to do, you're going to have to still do those things. So in taking time to grieve, you have to make sure that you take time to do that. But that's going to look however that looks for you. For me, I tried to write a letter to my mom. I couldn't do it originally because I felt like, oh my God, if I write this letter, then she's going to die. You know, I'm just completely dramatic. So I couldn't do it. But eventually I was able to write the letter. I'm still writing it. I write it every single time I add to it. The more I go through things, the more I, continue to heal and evolve. The more times I think about things that happened in my past that, you know, in the pursuit to finding her, I write stuff, you know, and I write from a place of anger. I write from a place of fear. I write from a place of sadness. I write from a place of pure, utter confusion. I write from every place that I feel, whenever I feel it, however I feel. So for some of you, that's probably going to be another thing for you to do, is to write a letter. If you have to write a letter to your future self, if you have to write a letter to your past self, if you have to write a letter to the girl in your 20s, the girl in your early 30s, whatever you have to do. If you lost children, if you have to write a letter to them, you just have to take time to grieve. And you have to understand that it is no rule book. It is no certain way that you have to do those things, but you must take time to do it. Because if you don't, it's going to eat you up. And then it's going to happen at an inopportune time that you're not prepared. It's going to happen 10 years later, and everybody going to be looking at you like, what's wrong with you? And you're probably not going to even know that you're grieving. So you want to take time and take space to do that as quickly as possible so that the people around you can have a little bit of an understanding as to what's going on with you, because they know the things that you just navigated through within the last few months. I hope that this helps you. I hope that you understand that highlight on, you don't have to bury anybody to grieve. But if you did bury someone, take time to grieve. Take time to grieve. Take time to be angry. Take time to be upset. Take time to feel however you feel. Give yourself that permission, because you owe it to yourself to be able to do that. I'm trying to hurry up because I don't necessarily know how to edit yet. So I don't want this video to be too long. But I just want to make sure I highlight some of the things that I have learned during this process. Oh, and I think the other thing that I wanted to point out that I just read here, I kind of said it earlier, but just take time to grieve even with the person being there. And I don't know what that looks like. You know, in an ideal situation, you would like to be able to do it with your mom, with your dad, with your kids, with your husband, or whatever. But sometimes the other person is not willing, the other person is not available to be present to help you navigate through some of those things. So sometimes you have to grieve with the person being present, with the person still being in your life. And when I say that, what I mean by that is that I don't want my mom to die. I'm not ready to have an actual real funeral for her, but I have to grieve what I thought life would be like when she got here. And I have to take time to do that. And that doesn't mean that I have to stop talking to her. That doesn't mean that I have to cut her off. That doesn't mean that every time something comes up that I have to say it directly to her. And if you need to do that, do that. You know, you have to do what's good for you. But for me, my mom's not necessarily available. She can't hold space for me. She can't listen to some of the things that I have to say. Sometimes I don't feel like it's fair for me to be able to spaz out every single time I get a thought in my mind. Also, when you've been through the things that I've been through, it can hit you at any moment. You can be sitting in a meeting at work and you can have a thought. You could be driving down the street. You can see somebody else with their mom. You can see somebody else with their kids. You can see somebody that's younger than you, living a more full life, and you feel like you didn't do that. Grief can hit you at any time, at any moment, at any place. And so when I say you have to take time to grieve, you do. But sometimes you don't always have the moment to do that. You can't always do it. I know I spent a lot of time, a lot of my 20s, going to work, showing up, looking like my best self. But in the inside, I was so hurt. You know, I am very good at being able to cry, go in the bathroom, cry, have my little moment, and then come out and be like nothing happened. I'm very good at doing that, but I'm also very good at sometimes not being able to disguise it so much. So I think that you should let others around you in on your grief. You should ask for help when you're able. You definitely need community to be able to get through some of this stuff. You know, you need support. For me, I don't know anybody that has walked through the things I've walked through, but I do know people that has been able to grieve things. And so you don't have to feel like their situation has to be like yours in order for them to be able to help you through it. No, people don't understand. No, people don't get it. It's a lot of people who still have their mother. It's a lot of people who has had their mother and father their whole life. But they can relate to what I'm saying. You know, they may have had to grieve their 20s. They may have had to grieve their expectations of what they thought their life would look like by now. You know, it's a lot of different things. So make sure you include others in your grief. Make sure you're open and you're honest. You know, don't be like me and just spaz out and just be crying and just a mess and not telling nobody why, you know. Also, take some time to just really go deep within yourself and just get understanding and clarity as to why you feel the way that you feel. If you feel sad, why do you feel sad? Did you listen to something? Did you look at some movie? Did you think about something? Why are you sad? Go back and trace back on those thoughts and those things that you were thinking about to have understanding as to why you're sad. Do inventory of yourself. And then once you do that, be intentional about making sure that you don't do that. You know, you can't be sad every single day. You can't have so much regret that you can't move forward in the future. So although it's okay and it's good to take time to grieve, you have to be mindful of the fact that you have to keep going. You have to show up for yourself. You have to show up for work. You can't expect for people to just tolerate your bad behavior because you're hurting and you're grieving. So you have to be intentional about your happiness. You have to be intentional about making sure that you just not a hot mess out here. And so one of the things I wanted to do also on each video is that I wanted to make sure that I give a scripture to kind of highlight the thing that I'm talking about. And I always want to point you back to God because that's like one of the main things that helped me through my life, period. Because if you know my story, you know. And if you don't, you'll get to know. But also music as well. So I want to give a song. Some of it's going to be worship music. Some of it's going to be Beyonce. Some of it's going to be Fantasia. It's just going to be whatever song that I felt like helped me through. And it might not be the actual topic, but just like one of the songs that I loved. So I want to make sure I always give you guys takeaways. So it'll be a scripture, a song, and then just high level key points of things that I did to kind of help me through each process. So the scripture for today is Psalms 23, 1 and 6. Let me see if I can pull it up real quick because I did not put it in here. So I gotta make sure I do that next time. But so just bear with me really quick, guys, because I didn't have it up, so I'm sorry. And I just use the Bible app. So I know that some people don't have a relationship with God and they don't really understand like how to, you know, cultivate that. I use the Bible app. You can always get you a Bible because you're going to need it on this healing journey. But the Bible app really, really works well as well. So give me 1 second. Just try to find this scripture. Okay, so Psalms 23, 1-6. So it's just kind of just to remind you, I guess I wrote this a long time ago, so I don't really know what my thought process was in this, but I think it's just kind of to remind you of who you are in God. And that, grief is real, pain is real, hurt is real, but you can get yourself to the other side through Christ. So I'm just going to read this. The Lord is my shepherd. I have all that I need. He lets me rest in green meadows. He leads me beside peaceful streams. He renews my strength. He guides me along right paths, bringing honor to his name. Even when I walk through the darkest valley, I will not be afraid, for you are close beside me. Your rod and your staff protect me and comfort me. You prepare a feast for me in the presence of my enemies. You honor me by anointing my head with oil. My cup overflows with blessings. Surely goodness and mercy and unfailing love will pursue me all the days of my life, and I will live in the house of the Lord forever. So this is just a reminder of who God is, his promises to us. Psalms has a lot of those promises. So you want to make sure you get in your word. You want to make sure that you know who God says you are. And so you have to remind yourself constantly that I can come out on the other side, that this is not the end. This is not the end of where things are going to be. So just to kind of go back over that is Psalms 23, 1-6. And then the song I chose, after watching The Color Purple, of course, it reminded me of this song, but I love Fantasia. So the song I chose this time is I'm Here by Fantasia. If you know, you know. If not, go listen to it. It's going to have you crying, but you just got to listen to the words. And I hope that in me sharing this, that you guys understand that, you can go through really hard things and you can get through it. And you have to take time to grieve, whatever that looks like for you. You have to take time to have a funeral for your expectations, for the things that you thought would be, for the things that you lost, because it's sad, and it sucks and it's not fair. But you got to get up. After you get through grieving, you got to get up. Quick down, quick up. So remember that even though it's not fair, it's sad, it hurts, take time to do what you need to do, but then be intentional about how you get back up and make sure that you get back up. Understand that whoever your family is that you're grieving, or whatever that thing is that you're grieving, don't deserve to have you on the floor. You don't deserve to be down, sad, feeling like you can't get through because of them, because of their choices and their choices, And so fight for your life. Fight for your life. But grief is not just one thing. It's not a rule book. You got to figure out what that looks like for you. Also, if you guys need more steps and more tools, I have a whole thing that I kind of wrote up on grief and just my process, but I just can't read all of it in this video. Feel free to reach out to me, to message me, to inbox me. We could always do a call, a chat, whatever. My goal is just to kind of help you guys through the things that I had to get through by myself, that I had to walk through, and I couldn't find a YouTube video. I couldn't talk to somebody and ask them for help. I went to therapy, and they'll just give you a high level overview of what you're supposed to do, but then you got to go home and you got to do the work. So this is what I'm making these videos for, and I hope that it helps. I want to always tell you guys that I love you. You're here for a purpose, for a reason, and this is a safe space, and this is a space for all of us, whether we're grieving or not, whether we've lost someone or not. But this is for my adoptees, because, we don't get grace to go through the stuff that we go through. Most of the time, people just tell us we're supposed to be grateful, and that's it. You're supposed to be grateful. And although we're grateful, it still hurts. It still sucks. It's still not fair. So I want to make sure that you guys know that you have a space, you have a friend in me, and I'm here to help you navigate these things as I do the same. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, and thank you for watching.